Hi everyone, in today's video we are going to be adding and subtracting rational numbers. A rational number is a number that can be written as the ratio of two integers. For example, 2 over 1, negative 3 over 1, or 1/4 are all examples of rational numbers. Let's add and subtract fractions using a common denominator. For number 1, we have 5 over 10 plus negative 7 over 10. When I'm adding and subtracting fractions, I'm going to keep the denominator the same. So since we have a denominator of 10, that is going to be my denominator for my answer. Now I can use the same rules that we applied for adding and subtracting integers. So 5 plus a negative 7. I know I have two different signs. I have a positive 5 and a negative 7. So I'm going to subtract these two numbers and I'm left with 2. And I have more negatives than I have positives. So my answer is going to be a negative. Make sure you simplify your fractions. So my 2 over 10 can be simplified by dividing by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 10 divided by 2 is 5. So I am left with negative 1/5. Let's look at number 2. Negative 3 over 8 minus 2 over 8. Again, I have a common denominator, so I can write that my answer will have a denominator of 8. And here I see that I have the same signs. So I have a negative 3 minus 2. So we are going further in the negative direction. So my answer is going to be 5. And we want to keep the sign the same, so I'm going to put a negative in front. So my answer is negative 5 over 8. And number 3, negative 1 over 3 plus 5 over 6. So right away I notice that I do not have the same denominator. So before I'm able to use my rules for adding and subtracting, I want to make sure I have the same denominator, the same number on the bottom. So to do that, I'm going to look for what they both have in common. So I can multiply 3 times 2 to give me 6. And whatever you do to the denominator, you want to do to your numerator. So our new equation is going to be negative 2 over 6 plus 5 over 6. Now I have the same number for my denominator and I can solve. My answer is going to have a denominator of 6. That's not going to change. I see I have negative 2 plus positive 5. So I have different signs. I'm going to subtract. So 5 minus 2. I'm left with 3. And I have more positives than I have negative. So my answer is going to stay positive. This fraction can be simplified. 3 over 6 can be reduced by dividing by 3. So my answer is 1/2. Let's look at adding and subtracting decimals by lining up the decimal point. So for number 4, I have negative 8.2 plus 9.1. I have different signs. I have a negative and a positive. So I know my numbers are going to cancel each other out. We're going to be subtracting. So to do this, I'm going to set up my equation and I'll start by writing the bigger number on top. So 9.1. I can label this as being positive. And I have negative 8.2. Since my positives and negatives are going to cancel each other out, we're going to go ahead and subtract. I can't subtract 1 minus 2, so we're going to have to borrow. Be careful when you're borrowing. This becomes an 11. 11 minus 2 is 9. And 8 minus 8 is 0. I have more positives in my answer than I have negatives, so my answer stays as 0.9 or 9/10. Let's look at number 5. 4.5 minus negative 3.7. So you learned that when you are subtracting a negative number, that's called a double negative. And a double negative will always create a positive. So all I have to do is line up my decimals and add. 4.5 plus 3.7. So 5 plus 7 gives me 12. 4 plus 3 is 7, plus 1 is 8. And I'm making sure that my decimal point stays lined up. So here my answer is positive 8.2. Number 6, 3 over 9 plus negative 5 over 9. I see that I have a common denominator, so I'm going to go ahead and write as my answer that I'm going to have a denominator of 9. It's not going to change. And now I can use my rules for adding and subtracting integers to solve 3 plus negative 5, which will give me 2. And I have more negatives than I have positives, so my answer is going to be a negative. 2 over 9 cannot be simplified, so my answer is finished. Number 7, negative 2 over 5 minus 1 over 5. Since I have a common denominator, I can write that my answer is going to have a denominator of 5. And my rule for subtracting is we are getting further away from 0. So negative 2 minus 1 is going to give me a negative 3. Number 8, negative 3 over 4 plus 7 over 8. Before I can solve, I have to make sure that I have a common denominator. So I have 4 and I have 8. I could multiply both of these numbers so that my denominator is 16, but an easier way that I can fix this problem would be to multiply so that I have denominators of 8. So to make my 4 into an 8, I'm going to do 4 times 2. And whatever I do to the bottom of my fraction, I have to do to the top, to my numerator. So my new problem looks like negative 6 over 8 plus 7 over 8. Now I have a common denominator, which is 8. I can write 8 in my answer. And now I can look at my numerators. Negative 6 plus 7. I have different signs, so they're going to cancel each other out. And I'm left with positive 1. Number 9, negative 4.2 plus 3.3. I'm going to set up my problem. I have negative 4.2 on top because it's the larger number. And on the bottom, I have 3.3. And these two are different signs. That means they're going to cancel each other out. We're going to subtract these numbers and see what we have. So 4 minus 3, we have to borrow. and we are left with 0.9. We have more negatives than we have positives, so our answer is going to stay negative. So it will be a negative 0.9. For number 10, we have negative 2.3 plus negative 1.6. Both of my numbers are negatives, so when that happens, we have the same sign. We're going to add them together, and we're going to keep the negative sign. So negative 2.3 and negative 1.6. We're getting so far away from 0. 6 plus 3 gives me 9. Bring down that decimal point. And 2 plus 1 gives me 3. Since both of my numbers are negative, my answer will stay negative.